us experts from around the country, as well as bringing to us folks across the state who are working on these issues. And so I want to highlight, not only do we have this knowledge that we didn't have 2.5 years ago about the issues in our state and what's the best way to fix them, but we also have some social capital. We have some relationships and experiences of working through difficult issues and coming to consensus. And I think acknowledging that about the present really gives us a firm foundation going forward. So what do I want to say about the future? We have incredible commitment amongst this group, and I'm just so in awe of each of you, the time and effort that you're willing to put into this. And we have some new opportunities. Yesterday, the Chief Justice's Commission on Fairness and Equity met, and they have begun to produce some reports, which I want to share with all of you. A report on, they looked at ability to pay across both the civil and criminal justice system. A lot of their recommendations are similar to and enhance what we've suggested. So I think there are some new opportunities to continue working on these issues with important stakeholders around the state. We also have some new challenges. One of the things that I want to see us focus on is figuring out benchmarks. How do we measure where we were, say, in 2020, where we are now in 2022, and what are our goals going forward? How do we measure? Are we really having an impact on the racial inequities in the criminal justice system? And one of the challenges with that is a recent development that the Administrative Office of the Courts has decided to no longer share ACES data, the criminal justice system data that we need to make those assessments. So that may be an issue that we take up as a full task force. So I'm mindful that these issues continue to be challenging, but I'm excited because I know that we have a lot of resources now at our disposal to try to address them. So with that, I want to thank the governor for his courage and wisdom in convening this task force initially. And I want to thank the Attorney General for his incredible commitment, his wisdom and leadership over the past 2.5 years. And I will turn it over to Attorney General Josh Stein.
Justice Searles, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for your vision and leadership throughout this entire process. It's kind of remarkable that we've been doing this work now 2.5 years, and it's been hard work looking at the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system, square in the eye, and doing everything in our power to change them for the better. And there is so much of the work that we've done together that I'm proud of, and I want to highlight a couple of those things in this year-end meeting. First, it's you all, the members of TREC. Everybody comes at this work from a different perspective. You have different careers, different life experiences, but we needed each one of you and your voice because tackling criminal justice reform is immensely complex, and effective solutions that address complicated issues are necessary, and that's why we needed to have well thought out ideas. Doing this work can be very polarizing. It can force people to retreat to their various corners and dig in, but this group did not do that. We chose a different path, and so that people from all different perspectives of our public safety system, whether it's policymakers, prosecutors, sheriffs, judges, advocates, police chiefs, police officers, regardless of where you all came from, we committed ourselves to discussing these tough issues with open minds and trying to advance the mission that the governor identified, and frankly, that the people of North Carolina deserve, which is making our criminal justice system better for all. Our proposed solutions were in fact better because of the push and pull from everyone who is willing to offer their perspective and thoughts. And you gave so much time and talent in coming up with the creation of the 125 recommendations that TREC initially made. And folks who did not serve on the task force cannot truly appreciate how much work you all did. I mean, the amount of work that you all have done on this task force is frankly unlike any task force I've been part of. And I appreciate everything that you've done. I'm very proud of all you've accomplished. So I thank you for that. The recommendations, of course, as you know, span the full continuum of the criminal justice system, from ways we can help people when appropriate, minimize interactions with the system, to enhancing the professionalism of law enforcement, from addressing the impact of poverty in our courts, to recognizing the collateral consequences of convictions. And we did not agree on every recommendation. That was never the expectation or the ask. But what we did ask, and what we all did, was set aside our specific concerns and stay true to the governor's mandate, which was to identify real solutions to the racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice system. And I'm grateful to the governor for not only asking us to do that, make recommendations, but then to work to implement them. Because none of us wanted to create a report that collected dust on a shelf. And as you all know, we have not done so. There's been major progress in a number of ways. There's been laws passed like SB 300, that champion the dignity for women, raising the minimum age for juvenile jurisdiction, the governor's establishment of the Juvenile Review Board, working with law enforcement all across the state as they choose to adopt new policies, many of which were recommendations of the task force, such as having co-responder models to answer certain calls involving emotional crises, or law enforcement assisted diversion programs. We know that the process of improvement is never done, and that there remains important work yet to be done from our recommendations. At our core, the work has been to further the restoration of trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. Just recently, we've seen how devastating it can be when a single sheriff, through his despicable words, shatters people's confidence that law enforcement will apply the law impartially and without bias. So the work of TREC remains relevant and urgent. And in that vein, I'm very pleased that we're joined today by Governor Cooper, who has some important news to share in that regard. Governor Cooper, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you, General Stein and Justice Earls, for your outstanding leadership. And I want to thank and welcome this morning the members of the Task Force on Racial Equity and Criminal Justice. And one of the things I want to do is to congratulate you on your tremendous success. I thank you for that. But I also want to map out the road ahead. Now, one of the great strengths of this group that's been alluded to by Justice Earls and by General Stein is the wide range of leaders who've been working together to make law enforcement and the criminal justice system fairer, stronger, and better. And your membership is just so diverse. It's been alluded to, but you've got law enforcement, judges, advocates for reform, advocates for victims' rights, advocates for people with disabilities, prosecutors, public defenders, elected officials, and many more. And each of you has been willing to engage and to have hard discussions to help us get to the best answers. That is extraordinary. The bottom line is to reduce crime and keep our communities safe while making sure the system operates fairly and without prejudice. It's obvious that your work is making significant progress toward those goals, but it's also very obvious that we are not yet where we need to be. I do want to take a moment to reflect on some of your successes as General Stein has laid out. You've worked in a bipartisan way to get the General Assembly to act, which is a great thing in and of itself. Passing that Dignity for Women Who Are Incarcerated Act is a tremendous accomplishment. The bill raising the age of minimum age of juvenile jurisdiction from 6 to 10. The bill that improves law enforcement recruitment, training, and accountability while establishing a duty for officers to intervene and report when they see another officer use excessive force. The roadmap that you gave to me on the Juvenile Review Board that's already in operation. You've spurred local innovations on violence prevention, mental health, community action. And you've hosted a lot of training sessions and raised awareness of the need to advance racial equity in criminal justice across our state. That's just some of what you've done. It's really amazing. But there is a lot of work we still need to do. As General Stein mentioned, you only have to look at the racist comments of the sheriff in Columbus County to see that problems still exist. And it's good to see General Stein and law enforcement across our state, the NAACP and myself, calling this out as being wrong. And it's good to see the district attorney and the courts take decisive action. We can and should have strong law enforcement, safer communities, and a fair criminal justice system. It's really probably never been harder to be a law enforcement officer. And that's one of the reasons that law enforcement across the state is having a hard time keeping and attracting good officers. We need to get them better pay and benefits and training. Cities, counties, and the state should continue to step up. Many of your recommendations help enhance officer safety, which has been real challenging right now, by building community trust in law enforcement. And we should be helping them by fully investing in mental health and substance use disorder prevention and treatment. So many law enforcement officers want the General Assembly to expand Medicaid to get help and treatment for the people with mental health issues that they are having to deal with every day. We need to get them that Medicaid expansion. I also want to address the president's announcement yesterday regarding simple possession of marijuana. This task force has already met this issue head on by recommending in your report last year that simple possession of a small amount of marijuana should not be a crime. Law enforcement and the criminal justice system are under-resourced right now, and they should be focused on stopping violent crime, drug trafficking, and other threats to safe communities. We also know that a conviction of simple possession can mar people's records for life and maybe even prevent them from getting a job. The General Assembly didn't pass your recommendations on this last session, but I believe they should. North Carolina should take steps to end this stigma. I've also asked our lawyers to examine North Carolina law regarding simple possession of marijuana convictions and pardons to determine if there is action we can and should take. In the meantime, while we work to make sure our criminal justice system is fairer, we must be laser focused on stopping the true criminals, those who are committing violent crime and particularly gun violence in our communities. It has to stop. Over the past few weeks, Attorney General Stein, our Department of Public Safety Secretary Eddie Buffalo, and I, along with a lot of staff, have been having separate statewide meetings with sheriffs, mayors, police chiefs, federal law enforcement officials to help tackle this scourge of gun violence. In the meantime, as you know, my executive order establishing this task force expires in December, and this is your last scheduled meeting. Your work has been too important to let this process end, especially when there's more work to do. So I'm glad to share with you today that I'll be extending the task force for racial equity in criminal justice. And I'll be signing an executive order next month to extend this vital work into 2023 and 24. There's no single strategy, but bringing people together will be an important part of the work ahead. And you guys are very good at that. In the next phase of this work, we'll focus on 4 areas. One is violence prevention, including evidence-based community violence intervention programs, restorative justice programs, youth crime reduction efforts, and school justice partnerships. Second, local law enforcement practices and accountability, Third, judicial system policies and practices that result in racially inequitable outcomes, including but not limited to charging, sentencing, fines and fees, and the collateral consequences of convictions. And fourth, collection, analysis, and public display of criminal justice system data. Justice Earls mentioned issues with that just a moment ago. I'm really looking forward to gathering with you in person next month to celebrate the work that you've accomplished and the work ahead. Many of you may be staying on the task force as members, and others of you will continue to stay engaged in this work in other ways. Either way, I know that you'll continue to make a real impact. Thank you so much for your work and commitment, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks a lot, guys.
Governor Cooper, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for your inspiring words. And yeah, as Justice Earl said, your courage. We really appreciate you. Justice Earls, I think the next section is the committee updates and discussion, which I'll manage if that sounds good to you.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, good. So we're going to now have reports from the various committees to let us know what you all have been working on the last weeks and months. And we will start with the Executive Branch Committee.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Attorney General Stein. I am very proud of the work that the Executive Branch Committee has done. We have gotten a lot done over the course of the past year, and we have been focused in two main areas in our work. And the first is work on recommendations affecting the Department of Public Safety. So I am probably not the expert in these. I'm hoping that if we have questions, there are other people that can help bail me out, but I do have some of the updates from DPS because we have made a lot of progress since the last time we got together. Generally speaking, in all of the recommendations, DPS has been moving forward and working towards achieving the goals of all the recommendations that relate to them that we published in the TREC report. I guess it's been a while ago now, but importantly, some specific updates with respect to transforming the use of restrictive housing, which is 105, recommendation 105. Western Correctional Center for Women, Catawba Correctional Center, Wilkes Correctional Center, and Lincoln Correctional Center are now all accredited, which brings the total number of DPS accredited sites to 10. And then they are continuing to review and revise policy and practice to meet the accreditation expected practices for restrictive housing. And Orange Correctional and Columbus Correctional will be the first two who will be accredited for restrictive housing facilities. And then Craggy Correctional is also pending an audit for the first part of 2023. So hopefully they will then be accredited. So a lot of movement in that direction in terms of getting different DPS facilities accredited. Recommendation 106, which is protect pregnant people in jails and prisons. And the governor alluded to this, but DPS has updated all policies related to the dignity law, and they have been issued now to staff. So the maternity leave program policy has been updated and issued with changes to ensure that upon admission, each pregnant person receives an automatic assessment of their eligibility for maternity leave program and an assignment to a social worker caseload. So big progress there. With respect to recommendation 107, which is enhancing prison personnel, as most of you who work in the state system know, we received our legislative increases this past July, but also correctional officers received an additional 1% legislative increase in July for a total increase of 4.5%. Hopefully that will go a long way towards the recruitment and retention issues that DPS is having, just like other law enforcement agencies. There was also the labor market adjustment survey, I think, that was done by OSHR, and the reserve of 8.1 million was set aside for the Department of Public Safety. So hopefully looking at some deployment of resources there in terms of being able to compensate staff and attract people to the profession. And also importantly, there is now a medical sign-on bonus, which was increased for eligible applicants in several different areas, including nurses and different healthcare technicians throughout DPS. So hopefully that will also help them to recruit individuals into their facilities. Recommendation 108, which is increasing funding for mental health services and programs in prisons. The efforts the DPS has been making within the self-directed violence and suicide prevention in the prison system, they've continued to grow those with a partnership with UNC Charlotte. And so one of the first steps that they took was to analyze the current self-injury risk assessment protocol and then develop what they call the self-injury risk assessment protocol for corrections. SIRAP-C is what they're calling it. And so the next steps that they will be taking there will be systematic implementation and training. So they've now developed the tool and will be systematically implementing that throughout the system and training all individuals throughout DPS on that tool. With respect to recommendation 110, which was expand the use of restorative justice and rehabilitation programming, they're continuing to monitor and initiate tablet content. So the tablets that each individual in prison has access to, they want to make sure they have access to different programming, treatment, and rehabilitation, in addition to family contact and support through use of these tablets. The number of tablets, they're operational at 30 different facilities now. And so the Hope University program was launched for these tablets, which is currently operating and provides more than 400 free courses and 20,000 pages of free content that can be accessed while in prison. Also, update on that front, the BJA Fresh grant vendor has completed the site visits, and so consultations with the designated reentry facilities, and so they're working towards the child-friendly visitation recommendations that were made, and the modifications have been initiated at Western Correctional for Women. Those are the brief DPS updates, which actually is quite a lot that they have been working on and have accomplished, so that's really great. The second set of what our executive branch committee has been working on are things focused on the two standards commissions, so criminal justice standards and sheriff standards. And the work that we've been able to do in that area is also really significant. So with respect to recommendation number 39, which was the RAT-BACK program, the RAT-BACK program has now been fully implemented. However, we are still trying to advocate for some additional funding there. So putting out that call to people on this Zoom meeting when you are having those conversations. Essentially, when we comply with the RAT-BACK program and are working with the FBI, the SBI was provided $200,000 to update their technology and make sure that their programming was up to date. But the standards divisions, which are run out of DOJ, also have to have the personnel to run all of these checks and all these fingerprints. And when we first get up and running, they're going to be about 52,000 fingerprint checks that we are going to have to do. And so we need technology and personnel also at DOJ to make sure that we can have a successful RAT-BACK implementation. So while we are fully committed to RAT-BACK and are moving forward with that program, in the upcoming session, perhaps we can look for some funding to help us accomplish that goal. Recommendation number 40 is minimum standards for excessive force. So as we've talked a lot about on these calls, the minimum standards for the law enforcement profession are set forth in both codes, the administrative code for the Sheriff Standards Division or Commission rather, and the Criminal Justice Education and Training Standards Commission. We talked about including in those minimum standards a prohibition against excessive force. And we started first, I will say, with recommendation 54, which is making the minimum standards the same. And we have completed that recommendation. So as of effective actually October 1st, the CJ rules went into effect, and effective January 1st, the sheriff's rules will go into effect, and both codes will now be the same. So we have complied and completed Rule 54. In doing that, it actually has taken us quite a bit of time. And so the next step is to look at recommendation 40 and 41, which are changing the minimum standards as it relates to excessive force and also the penalties that are allowed to be levied by the commissions for the use of excessive force. And that's a conversation that we have started and are having now at CJ and working forward and trying to come up with what would be appropriate recommendations to change the minimum standards on that front. Recommendation 51 was to create a best practices guide for recruitment and retention. I am pleased to say that was completed back during the summer or maybe even before then. And so that is completely done. We now have both commissions working jointly together, have issued the best practices guide in recruitment and retention, and also in protest response. And so we have both of those best practices guides available through the joint working groups of the commissions. Recommendation 52, which has also been completed, is expanding the CJ Fellows program statewide. And of course, most of you know that after Senate Bill 300, that was accomplished, which is great. We are still working on, through both commissions, some issues that are relevant to this task force, including the gap between high school and college. So trying to get people interested in criminal justice profession from high school to college, because you can't become a law enforcement officer until you're in your 20s. And so keeping that interest, bridging that interest, using CJ Fellows, but also working on some of the continual enrollment issues that we've been facing with the CJ Fellows program. So hopefully we can address some of those soon, and that will allow us to have even more folks go through the program and successfully complete it and move into the law enforcement profession. Recommendation 56 was revamping BLET. As many of you know, that is in progress, and we hope to have a BLET launched by the end of 2023 or 2024. Many of the concepts that we've discussed here at the task force have been incorporated in that BLET revision, including, importantly, having ethics throughout BLET in every single section. So with a focus on ethics in everything that an officer is learning to do in their job. And then 57 is similar to that, which were changes to in-service. Senate Bill 300 addressed some of that, and the commissions and the Justice Academy are already way down the line in implementing those changes and already have a schedule for when those various courses will be offered and the frequency with which they will be repeated, and have established that and are moving forward on content. So a lot of really good updates there, and we're still moving forward on some of them, but we've accomplished a lot over the course of the past year, and the group has worked really hard. So thank you to all of our group members for your hard work in this space. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them or call in for help.
Anyone have any questions? Leslie, that was a great report. Justice Earls.
Yes, thank you so much, Leslie. It's really impressive, the breadth of the work that's being done, and your thorough report. Thank you. I actually have a question about the very first thing you talked about, recommendation 105, because our recommendation, this is the restrictive housing question, and our recommendation was pretty specific about some of the policies that we thought should be considered, including limits on the number of hours and days a person can spend in restrictive housing, limits on who can be put in restrictive housing, limits on the types of infraction that can lead to restrictive housing. And this may be something, so what I don't know is you gave us information about facilities that are being accredited, but what are the accreditation standards and how do they match up to our recommendations? I did actually look online to see what publicly available material might tell us about the accreditation standards for restrictive housing, and it's probably my weakness, but I couldn't find it. And so is there anything you can tell us about the extent to which being accredited means you're following what our recommendations are in substance?
So I can tell you what I know, and then I will maybe call in for backup. Okay. The accreditation standards are based on the American Correctional Association accreditation. So it's ACAA. And that is the nationwide accreditation standards that we are trying to implement through DPS. And so that's what we are working towards. The standards that they set forth are the ones that we're trying to comply with. I can also tell you that DPS is a working group that's working on all of the policy revisions and reviewing each program and the expansions to make sure that DPS is in compliance with the ACA expected practices there. Now, beyond that and what the specific requirements are, I'm going to punt. And if Natalia knows, or if anybody else from DPS, Mr. Secretary, I won't put you on the spot. But if anyone else from DPS has any of that information, I would be happy to defer to them.
Yeah, it's an important question, Justice Earls. I don't know exactly how they match up, and you're right that it's not easy to find that information. I don't think it's online, but I do have a book that DPS gave me of the ACA standards, and I also have one for Kerwin that I need to get to him, and maybe he and I can look at that and see kind of how they match up and if there's things that are missing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Justice Earls. Anyone else have a question for Leslie? Okay, great. The next report will come from the Judicial Branch Committee.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Very well.
All right.
Thanks, Mr. Thornburg.
So I'll go over in just a minute the our efforts regarding the implementation of our ongoing projects. But since our last meeting, Judge Clark has attended the training on the ability to pay rule and the reduction of fines and fees. And you've already heard several references to that. This issue is very important to us. There's some question about how and when this new Form 415 should be used. And Judge Clark, would you like to bring us up to date on the status of this? I think folks might be interested. I think I saw Judge Clark.
She was on, but we may have lost her.
Okay. Well, if she comes back, we can do that. Okay. Well, suffice it to say that we have the new Supreme Court rule that trial judges will take the ability to pay into account, and we also have the new AOC Form 415, which has had several iterations, and that's being implemented. And there is an increase in the use of that, but my understanding is there needs to be some additional training. So moving on to some topics that our committee discussed and agreed would be projects for the next iteration of TRIC. First is the fines and fees, which is related to the ability to pay. And our goal is to promote statutory changes to be in discussion with the legislature regarding those monetary penalties, and also giving our judges increased discretion with regard to imposition of those. Next is to expand our school justice partnerships. I think that is ongoing, and we've seen some success with regard to that program. To expand pretrial services across our state. There have been some successes there, and also the continuing effort to realize bail reform across our state in various jurisdictions. Next would be to continue to expand meaningful ability to pay inquiry, and that not only revolves around training with Form 415, but other training efforts as far as what judges can do to make that meaningful, and also keep courts going, because I know particularly in the district court context, the volume is high, but we believe from our research that you can do both. You can keep the dockets moving, and you can also have a meaningful inquiry with regard to that. Hosting reentry simulations for legislators regarding reentry issues and collateral consequences of convictions. This is an issue which appears to have broad bipartisan interest, and we look forward to working with the folks in the legislature regarding that issue. Continue partnering with prosecutors to discuss prosecutorial discretion regarding the use of pleas, the use of the ASR program, the Advanced Supervised Release option, and development of habitual felon working groups as a way to examine the use of that particular prosecutorial tool. And that's been done in some jurisdictions with some success. So continue working with prosecutors on those efforts. Expand access to public defenders by increasing the number of IDS offices statewide. That has been done to some extent, and we'd like to continue to take a look at that, and as a way of expanding access to good attorneys to handle these cases for our indigent clients. And with regard to expunctions, expand awareness of and access to licensed restoration clinics, and also the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center services. We have seen these efforts taking place across the state with significant success, and we'd like to continue that. And we want to make sure our attorneys are aware of the services that are offered through the the resource center. Realizing more representative juries, and by studying the extent to which our jury lists currently reflect or not the adult population of each county based on a variety of demographic factors. And we need to drill down into the data there and have that available, with the understanding that we protect the security of all that information, but at the same time come out with juries at the end of the day that look like the community. And so those are the main efforts that we've been involved in, and those are the ones that we believe that we would like to continue to focus our efforts on. There are a few others that that have come up in the committee discussions as possible areas of focus moving forward, and those are an area of sentencing with regard to juveniles and juvenile life without parole sentences. Excessively long sentences, including the use of habitual felon charging discretion, and racial disparities in sentencing. And with regard to racial equity training for attorneys, judges, and others, there has been a consensus among the committee to continue to promote the implementation of these recommendations of the full committee in some form to our court system personnel. And also, TREC will be in contact with our state bar regarding the state bar's new CLE requirements, and determine to what extent racial equity programs can be encouraged in terms of getting CLE credit for our attorneys. And again, back to the issue of fines and fees, we'd like to attempt to track the impact of fines and fees by possibly documenting how these driver's license restoration programs, where they have taken place, and the waiver of fines and fees affect individuals and families and communities to the extent that we can track that, track those impacts. Like to try to do that. And I think that is it. My understanding, we do have an ongoing project with the School of Government regarding this 415 form, and we'll continue. Somebody may want to speak to that, but we're going to meet again in October and then in November to continue to work on these tasks and projects. So that's what I have. I'm happy to turn it over to any of my colleagues. I don't know if Judge Clark is back. If not, Ellen or Reggie, you have anything you want to add that I may have left out? Or Jasmine? All right, any questions that I can pass off to somebody else?
Yes, Deborah?
Let me lower my hand because I always forget. Thank you, Judge Thornburg, for all of the areas that your committee is working on. And I will get with you on a number of them later, but the one that sparked my interest today is the School Justice Partnership. I would implore your committee to make sure that whoever endeavors to become part of the School Justice Partnership, that their expulsion procedures for that school system be explored. I am part of a county that is one of the initial school justice partnerships, and we just this school year eliminated K-5 school suspensions, which is a prime factor that creates the school to prison pipeline, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And for those who are already in that system, please make sure that they consider not doing it. I did ask the group that is over that, and of course, they didn't answer me last year when they were on TV.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dix Maxwell. Anyone else? Yes, Kerwin, please.
Thank you, Judge Thornburg, for that beautiful update. And so I just had a question about the expansion and the knowledge of access to expulsion clinics and kind of the campaign that you guys have been taking to bring awareness to community members and organizations that kind of focus on expunctions? Is it a specific pathway that you guys are taking, or is it a select group of people? And how can individuals in the community and organizations that specialize in this work get involved and bringing attention to, the expunction opportunities that are out there?
I'll let Ellen or Reggie or somebody, but I do know that that Legal Services has been involved in this in a systematic way, and of course that is not something that is available in all parts of the state. So that's an issue, and the restoration clinics, that's another piece, and a number of district attorneys and their districts have taken that up and have been successful with those initiatives. In terms of systematic statewide expunction efforts, I'm happy to hear from anyone if you have information on that.
Judge Thornburg,
It was me, Jasmine. Go ahead.
I was just going to add that this is also an issue we've been working on with the prosecutorial advisory group of the task force, and are going to be publishing, as a part of the model policy and information sheet project, a guide for prosecutors that want to do driver's license restoration and expunction work. It's a really complicated process, and so I've been working with prosecutors on that group, as well as AOC and legal aid, on a go by to help people who want to get started. So that's going to be another deliverable that's going to come out of this work, and I think it'll be helpful to the conversation.
Yeah, Kerwin, this, as you know, it's a fairly complicated process, or it appears to be, if you're not an attorney. So we need an outreach efforts to do that. I mean, I think that could be done through the various pro bono pipelines that are out there to do that. And getting the word out is an issue. This has been discussed in the Chief Justice's Faith and Justice Committee too, through communities of faith to get the word out there, and any other methods by which this can be disseminated, because the method is there, but the process can be a little daunting. So that's certainly an effort that we need to continue to focus on. So thank you for highlighting that.
If I can I'll just add that what some of the folks who are doing this work, so Campbell Law School has a clinic, the Equal Access to Justice Commission has been doing some driver's license restoration work, but the problem is they can't do the outreach to the rural areas. And sometimes people might live in Wake County, but their conviction was in Columbus County. So getting their expunction has to happen where the conviction was. So those problems exist. But the other thing that Judge Brooke Clark brought to our attention is a goal of documenting the impact on people once they do get either the expunction or their driver's license restored. She says when that happens in her courtroom, she sees just how many more life opportunities people have as a result of that, and that our task force could be beneficial around this issue if we could highlight some of that and demonstrate the impact on individuals, families, and communities.
Anyone else have another question? All right, Judge Thornburg, thanks so much. Next up is the Local Policy Committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I'll take this, and we did 3 or 4 slides. I don't know, Ellen, do you have those slides to show?
I do. Are y'all seeing them?
I see them.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful.
We're way too earnest. Our committee is way too earnest. We did slides as well, but only 2 or 3. And the first slide, and I want to, every time we've made a presentation, we put this slide up because it's important to note who the members are of this committee, because it is very much a working committee. The Attorney General mentioned earlier that he was so impressed of task force that he's been on, that this task force is comprised of people who are actually doing a ton of work, and that's certainly true with the local committee. Every one of these people have been hands-on and have devoted a great deal of time and energy to what we've been doing over the past year, and it's important to note that. So what have we been doing? Ellen's next slide. So 2 years ago when we started, we really looked at it, and it was in a way it was kind of overwhelming, because local is a little bit different from the other categories. When you look at trying to get specific action on the local level, you're talking about, you've got 100 different counties, you've got hundreds more municipalities, you've got 40-something judicial districts, you've got hundreds of law enforcement agencies, and all of them have their own policy authority, and so and they don't align. So when you look at it, it's almost overwhelming. How can we get specific action on the local level? And what we said was, well, we really want a three-part process. First part is to go out into the state and raise awareness and education about what TREC is, the things that TREC has been doing, the goals that TREC is trying to accomplish. Also then reach out to people who are experts in the state for input, to advise us, to collaborate with us, and ultimately help us do that awareness program. And then actually do the advocacy work that is necessary to make changes on the local level. So we looked at it as three different broad areas. So this year, what have we done in the different areas? Ellen, next slide. Beginning with awareness and education. We go out, and this is a major part of the work that the committee members do, the work commitment that they have is we make presentations out in the state to professional organizations, to government organizations, and the presentations are pretty straightforward. They have a structure. We talk about the origins of TREC, why TREC got established, what is TREC, who are the people on TREC, what are we trying to accomplish, and then we tailor it depending on what organization we talk to. If we're talking to law enforcement people, we talk about some of the law enforcement initiatives. If we're talking to judicial people, we'll talk about judicial initiatives. If we are talking to elected officials, we talk about just general government initiatives and so on. Then we have Q&A and follow-up. We've done a lot of those. That has been a big part of what we've tried to do, because we think that the more awareness that can be raised at the grassroots level, it will help us with some of these other specific items that we're trying to get accomplished through legislative action in the General Assembly or through the judicial changes that Judge Thornburn talked about. The more awareness on the local level by the average person, it will help. All right, so I also have to say to this point, a critic of TREC made a comment recently that about this outreach program that we go, TREC will go anywhere talk to anybody who will let, and I'm quoting here, let TREC have a foot in the door. We'll talk to them. And I think that they meant that as a criticism, but it's actually a compliment, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're willing to talk to any organization in the state who wants to listen, and we've been very well received in each of the presentations that we made. We hope to continue that moving forward. It's labor intensive, but it has been a very effective way to spread the message of what TREC is and what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, next slide. So another big part of what we've been doing has been reaching out to people in the field and say, okay, let's talk about these things. Let's talk about the initiatives, talk about the recommendations, and let's have conversations about the various issues. We've formed 2 advisory groups specifically, one in the field of law enforcement, one with the victims and community advocacy community in North Carolina, and they have been meeting monthly. And each month we have a different topic that we discuss, and those again have been, in our opinion, very successful in terms of building understanding across groups, and at least with the case of the law enforcement advisory group, we have done model policies. They've given us input and advice on the model policies that we've done in different law enforcement topics and they're posted on the website. You can see them on the website. So we've done that. In addition to that, we have reached out and engaged extensively with North Carolina experts, call them subject matter experts. That is to say, if we're talking about diversion programs, then we reach out and we want to talk to people in the state who are doing it now and let them help us think through how we can reach out and help other people think about that. In the case of diversion programs, we've had a number of people who have talked to us about that. Also, the presentations that we've given, sometimes when we reach out and put ourselves in front of the public, it's not necessarily us as TREC that are doing those presentations. We might just turn it over to subject matter experts. And an example of that, a recent example of that, is we presented at the annual conference of North Carolina Association of County Commissioners in Concord last month, I believe, or August. And we didn't present as TREC necessarily. We brought in 2 subject matter experts. One of them actually a member of our task force, Mary Pollard, who spoke to the commissioners about public defenders in North Carolina. We also had Sonia Harper, who is the director of the Mecklenburg County Community Criminal Justice Services. There's a department within Mecklenburg County. And she talked about diversion programs, various types of diversion programs. And if you're a rural county, how do you even begin looking at those issues? And that presentation was very well received. But the point being, that's an example of not necessarily a task force member getting in front of a group and talking about TREC, but TREC facilitating a meeting or a presentation in which issues that TREC deals with are presented by a subject matter expert. So next slide, which leads us to the advocacy part. We've directed our advocacy in the aggregate, and by that I mean we have not reached out and tried to go to every county commissioner meeting in the state or every city council meeting in the state or talk to every sheriff in the state. What we've done is try to work through organizations that serve those constituencies. The biggest example right now, or the thing that we're pointing to that we think has real potential, is our relationship with the Association of County Commissioners. I mentioned we presented at their conference last month, and they have been very receptive to working with us and in areas that align with the interests of the county. And we will continue that relationship with them. We have a presentation. Every quarter a board meeting. They have board meetings, and we're scheduled to make presentations to one of their subcommittees in each of the board meetings coming up this year, which is a valuable resource and a valuable opportunity. We've reached out to the League of Municipalities, to school boards, in other organizations with more limited success. Part of that is on us in terms of just time constraints, but we hope to continue as we know now that Trek is continuing. Perhaps we can continue to build those relationships over the next 2 years as well. In addition to that, we look for areas of alignment with other organizations, other NGOs in the state. Are there commonalities and interests that we might work together on? An example of that, and just because it's on my mind, because I dealt with it yesterday for a moment or two, is the mental health issue that is noted in several of our recommendations. Well, there's alignment with that, with other organizations in the state. And yesterday we talked with the Rural Center. It's a big issue with the Rural Center. And talking about, are there commonalities that we might work together on? So the advocacy is largely in aggregate, but it has been very efficient, and it is something that we look to continue, figure a way to continue those things over the next 2 years, which leads to the final slide, which is, what do we see as ongoing opportunities in this area? LEAG is the Law Enforcement Advisory Group. That is such a tremendous resource for us, but also for the members of that group. And that's a group of sheriffs, police chiefs, other law enforcement professionals, highway patrol leaders who, again, meet every month. We have a different topic and have every month have a very lively and spirited conversation. I tell people this on a personal note. I sit in on these meetings every month, and it's one of the high points of my month because I never leave that meeting without being really impressed with the dedication and the quality of those law enforcement officers and how they really want to serve their communities, and they're very thoughtful, and it's been a real resource for us, and that will continue. The relationship with the County Commissioner Association will continue. Again, presentation opportunities will continue, with the caveat that it is labor intensive, and we never do everything that we want to do, but we have done a lot, and that is to the credit of those people on the first slide, all of those members of that committee, because they really have, Josh and Anita, they really have worked really hard over the past 2 years. And with that, I will hand it back to you, or if there are any questions that I could redirect to Jasmine.
Any questions for Mike while y'all are thinking about that? I want to say a word on the Law Enforcement Advisory Group and the members of the task force who are from law enforcement, like Sheriff Miller, Sheriff Burkhead, Sergeant Garton, Chief Hawkins. They've been participants, but we've augmented them with other law enforcement representatives. And I like the words that Mike used to describe them, lively and spirited discussions. And they are, because even among law enforcement, there is wide-ranging opinion on how to best implement some of the recommendations we've made. And, not everybody on the advisory group agrees with every recommendation, but what we've asked them to do is not necessarily agree with the recommendation, but at least say, this was a recommendation. And for an agency that wants to pursue a policy change in this regard, what is a good way to go about it? And everybody has really worked hard and with exceptionally good faith to pursue that mission. So with that said, anybody have any questions for Mike about that or other parts of the local committee? All right, thanks, Mike, very much. And now we'll hand it off to the data committee for a report.
Wonderful. I am actually going to pass it. I'm going to share my screen and pass it to two members of the data committee that are here with us today to talk about our efforts since the last time we met. And I'm going to pass it over to Michelle Beck first, and then Ben Van Holt right after her.
Thanks, Ellen. I'm Michelle Beck. Many of you are not familiar with me, so I am the director of the Criminal Justice Analysis Center with the Governor's Crime Commission. The Governor's Crime Commission, the CJAC within the commission, was reestablished in 2018 by the Secretary of Department of Public Safety. And our mission at the CJAC is to create a data infrastructure from the many different criminal justice data sources in an effort to develop criminal justice benchmarks and provide analytics. We have begun that effort with the Justice Data Portal, which is available on the Governor's Crime Commission site. We have crime report and traffic stop data there as the beginning. We hope to grow that. And in an effort to grow that, and also just to increase communication among the data community in criminal justice, on September 1st, the Governor's Crime Commission voted to create the Data Advisory Group for Criminal Justice. The purpose of the group is to share information and raise important questions to support evidence-based policy decisions throughout the state. And the membership will be comprised of the data-focused representatives from agencies throughout North Carolina's criminal justice and social service systems. Several of the members of the TREC Data Committee have expressed interest in participating in that, and we are starting to invite members to that. It'll be our executive director, Caroline Farmer, and also the chair of the Governor's Crime Commission will be soon, extending invitations to serve on or participate in the data advisory group. And just to give you an idea of the purpose, so it's to have a place for collaboration and to promote data sharing in criminal justice, and to also ensure the quality of the data. We know the only good data has to be quality data to be informative and help with policy making, and also to enhance the efficiency, transparency, and accountability of criminal justice in our state by providing this data. And the goals in having the data group are to increase the communication and cooperation and coordination among law enforcement, courts, service agencies, corrections, and multiple levels of government. We'll be building these relationships and increase data sharing and the ability to collaborate with research. We'll be able to identify the data available and the research to inform decision makers and promote uniform data collection across agencies to improve the performance measurement data that we have. So all of this is an effort to consolidate the data efforts across the system to make a more efficient and accountable criminal justice system. So that's the Data Advisory Group.
Thanks, Michelle. Ben, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. So going along, very neatly piggybacking off of Michelle's update, we are putting together a sort of high-level overview of what data exists both statewide and at the local municipality level across the state, what the sources are of those data, whether or not it's publicly available, what format it's in, how frequently it gets updated, what the limitations are. So we're just taking a look at
Ben, we lost you.
Through court appearances, charging, conviction, and sentencing, and taking note of where our data in those areas come from and how we can use it, just so that we have a current map of what we think is available right now and how it can interface with the GCC and their group, so that we can all be on the same page in terms of what we know, what we don't know, and what gaps we need to fill in.
Perfect. Thank you both. I really appreciate this. I hope that people have had the opportunity to come to some of our data committee meetings. I really appreciate everyone that's participated in them. We're better for it. Thank you both for being here with us. I'm going to give a quick update on how we've been thinking about this work moving forward, which really maps onto what Michelle and Ben have been talking about. Our wonderful chair, Emily Coward, is actually teaching a class right now, so she can't be here with us. The two ways we've been thinking about this data work moving forward is to think about creating a criminal justice longitudinal data study. As I'm sure everyone on this call knows, the criminal justice system is made up of a bunch of moving parts and really interconnected agencies and actors. It's really a system of systems, and we've been learning from people around the state who do this work, both in the criminal justice context and in other policy contexts, that our data efforts and environment should really reflect that. We are talking about and think we should look further into linking data from across agencies. So think about CJ Leads data, data from diversion and pretrial services, AOC data, Opus data. We really see a lot of benefit in linking those and using it as an important tool for researchers and policymakers, but also for practitioners. The goal with such a data study is really to be able to look at change over time so we can support evidence-based public policy decisions and performance management for the different criminal justice system actors that exist. And the other aspect of TREC's work we see, and Justice Earls already talked about this earlier, is being able to measure TREC's impact. That is something that I think exists in certain projects, but we want to make sure that we're looking at it for all of TREC's work. This could mean advising like a newly implemented program or policy on how they can collect data on it. Could also look like supporting new research projects. We really want to make sure that we are making the recommended changes with these policies or programs, and that we're reaching the ultimate goal of reducing racial bias in our criminal justice system. So this is the path we see moving forward for this data work. I'm forever grateful for everyone who's participated in this data committee in this iteration. So thank you all. And if you have any questions for us, we are here to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions for the data committee? Well, Ellen and team, thank you for trying to wrangle information that is not easily identifiable or analyzable, and you guys are pulling it together, and we're very, very much appreciative. Okay, Justice Earls, I'll hand it off to you for the public comment section.
Great, thank you so much. I know that we have some folks already in the waiting room, if you will. I do, because we did schedule this as a 2-hour meeting, and we have just a couple minutes. I do want to give them a moment to the task force members. If there's anyone who has not had an opportunity to speak, any of the task force members, if there's any comments you want to make, any observations about any of the reports, I know we've covered a lot, but I just wanted to give a moment if there's anyone who, and thank you, Sergeant Garten, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I kind of contemplating on if I was going to say anything or not, but this very well may be the last full task force meeting that we had together. And so I just want to say to the folks on the task force who have done the hard work, there's been, critics on both sides of the fence here. But for the task force members, I want to say thank you for, number one, being willing to ignore the folks who aren't in the arena doing the work, right? My mama used to tell me a long time ago, she said, when you find yourself surrounded by giants, you've got two options. One of those options is to be in awe or to be a David, right? And I don't think she meant it in the manner in which we all just automatically thought of, right? To slay a giant. No, what she was saying is have the courage to do what is necessary to be done. And for the folks on the task force, I really appreciate the opportunity because it is not lost on me. Many of the meetings that I sat in on, I'm the lowest ranking member in the room. However, generally speaking, we engage in what I believe to be very spirited and thoughtful debate about the best way to move forward. So we have ignored the critics and we have done the work. And although some people show up and want to kind of downplay the amount of work that we've done, I think what we all agreed as a task force was reminds me of one of the sayings that I keep on my wall here at work. It's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit, right? We haven't been seeking credit. We've been seeking change. And so I just wanted to say, because I don't know where I'll fall on the continuation of this task force, but either way, continue to seek the change, ignore the critics who aren't in the arena doing the work, and it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as the change comes. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to work with so many of you, and I look forward to the opportunity to continue this good work as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tally.
Thank you. And I just also want to sort of echo what Sergeant Garten said, and say what I found so powerful and important and impressive about this task force was that we took on probably one of the most difficult issues that faces our state and our country at a time of real difficulty for everyone, and that the professionalism in which this task force took it on, the staff of the Attorney General's office and the governor's office, who did just an extraordinary amount of work. I mean, I really was just blown away, particularly in those first 3 to 4 months, but then it continued for years of really, getting us all of the critical information about what was happening across the country, what were the innovative ways that we could really problem solve. And then also the dialogue was so important. Like I think about having Kerwin and Sergeant Garten in the same committee with Secretary Hooks and being able to have difficult conversations about policing and about the experiences of people of color, and talking in very specific ways to then go towards how do we then take on concrete issues. And lastly, I'll say to our leadership of this committee, I thought it was just brilliant to not just look to the legislature. Of course, we want the General Assembly to pass laws on these critical issues. And I'm very proud of the work of our legislators and really being able to have bipartisan movement forward. But then also to look to the executive branch, the judicial branch, the local areas, communications, data, and our philanthropy community was just the right way to do this, that it really was an all hands on deck thing. So I just want to say thank you to each of you for all of the work that you did. And I'm excited that this will continue in one form or another. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Morey.
Well, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be redundant. I agree with everything everyone has said, but the leadership of the Attorney General Stein and Justice Earls and Governor Cooper, it's been an amazing 2 years. And I'm really thrilled that we can meet each other in November, hopefully for a great meeting in person. But the coming together and the governor's staff, and I have to say, this Juvenile Sentencing Review Board, we've seen results. We have seen 3 teenagers who have been incarcerated for decades now being released and productive members of this state, and they've touched our hearts. We've met with them. The governor's office has come and met with them. But that's a real tangible difference we've made to people's lives. And Ben Fenholt, with all he's done with the advocacy of attorneys, we're reviewing 300 cases. And it's taking a lot of time and effort, but it's a chance to really show redemption, justice, and mercy. And that's what I think this task force is all about. So it's just been a real honor. I think Senator Muhammad and I, we want to continue making legislative pushes. And sometimes it's an uphill battle, but we can do it. And so from all the other subgroups, any legislative statutory changes, we promise to keep working on it. So just thank you. It's an honor to be a part of you all.
Great. Well, thanks to all of you who spoke. We will have more opportunities for reflection and comments in November. I just didn't want any of our task force members to feel like they wanted to say something and never had an opportunity at this meeting. So not seeing any more hands, I will move us to the public hearing portion of our meeting. And I will start as you all know, people have signed up to speak for 2 minutes. And I believe, Ellen, if you could go ahead and add our first speaker from the ACLU, and I think there'll also be a timer on screen so that once they join, they'll know how long they have, and we'll start as soon as they are promoted to a panelist.
Yes. I believe that Daniel is joining us now.
Okay, Daniel, there you go.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much, Justice Earls and members of TREC. I just wanted to join briefly and thank you for your work. Really appreciate, all the long hours. I mean, I did firsthand see so many of you all just grind it out and sort of be in the trenches day in and out. So really appreciate that. It made a difference. And, was really encouraged that Governor Cooper is committed to continuing this work because, like I said last time, it does make a huge difference and people matter. So I want to echo what AG Stein said about y'all making a difference. Also, institutions matter. And I think that as much as the key sort of institutional players here are the people with political power staying attached to the work. I think that'll be huge for whether or not TREC succeeds in phase 2 or not. And then the last thing I'll say is really want to lift up what President Biden did as a symbol of trying to redress the war on drugs that both he and Governor Cooper were a part of and law enforcement has been a part of for years, and really encourage that and want to hope that he not only sort of mirrors what President Biden did, I'm talking about Governor Cooper here, but also, we talked about expunctions earlier, we could drastically expand that sort of relief by the governor using commutation power to grant that relief to individuals who are already eligible, just don't know to petition. You could also do that with commuting death sentences. I know that Governor Cooper, or I believe that he's not support the death penalty. Being able to take direct action like that would be huge. And I'll just end by saying that Governor Cooper was. It was amazing that he granted April Barber and others relief, and so hope to see that. And one way the ACLU will contribute is by actually empowering April Barber and others, people who are impacted, to go to the legislature and continue to advocate for systemic change. So thank you.
Great, thank you. The next person for public comment is Sierra Cobb.
Good morning. Thank you all for all your hard work. I just want to highlight 2 things. I'm not sure if you've seen the NC Policy Watch news that came out, but we've had a high number of suicides. I myself have been working on trying to do something about mental health outside of the prison because we just don't have the capacity inside of prison. I also want to highlight the shortage of staff because that kind of overlays as to why we have a lot of suicides, and just realize that we can't hire our way out of the shortage and that we have to start thinking about what we're going to do as far as letting more people go. So I think those things are really 2 important things that really need to be taken into consideration. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Craig Waleed is next.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here. Yes, my name is Craig Waleed. I am from Disability Rights, North Carolina. I just wanted to mention that we have started as of May 22, the End Solitary North Carolina movement, which is part of the National Unlock the Box campaign against solitary confinement. And we are a coalition comprised mostly of stakeholders from across our state of North Carolina, and our mission is to end solitary confinement in North Carolina prisons. We know that this coalition, the TREC coalition, had made recommendations to Governor Cooper back in, I think, 2019 or 2020, was it, to implement the Nelson Mandela rules. And so we are building upon that recommendation as your group has identified solitary confinement as inhumane and torturous behavior. And we believe that all incarcerated people deserve to be treated fairly, justly, and in a manner that does not discriminate against their humanity. And so we're advocating, again, for the implementation of the Mandela rules, which you already know are the UN's recommendations for fair and humane treatment of incarcerated people, including limiting the use of solitary confinement to a minimum of 15 days. And so what I'm asking essentially is that you and any of your networks, please join us in building momentum and demanding our state's government implement the Mandela rules and end solitary confinement in North Carolina prisons. You can find out more about us by going to the Disability Rights North Carolina website under End Solitary NC. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I want to say to all of our speakers today, we also welcome any additional written comments. So if there's any materials you'd like us to review, I think there's an email on the TREC website through which you can submit written comments as well. And that would be the same place you signed up to speak. So I think our last speaker is Curtis Hill. Mr. Hill, you're still on mute.
All right. Good morning. My
Good
name
morning.
is Curtis Hill. I'm the branch president for the NAACP in Columbus County, where our sheriff, where our sheriff said some disparaging remarks about his staff and as well other African Americans in the county. And we are just coming to just thank you all for the work, the hard work that you have been doing about this issue. And we're just requesting that we have a complete investigation of all the governors and Judge Stein's office and everyone, that we can actually have a full investigation of the entirety of that department, because we realize because of all of your work as a partnership, that we realize that this is not the way that we want law enforcement to behave in North Carolina in general. And we know that the lion's share of law enforcement officers do not act or behave in that way. And it's a black eye on the professionalism of the law enforcement across the state of North Carolina. And so we are asking for a complete investigation of this matter. And also, as we try to build Columbus County back together, as we have been very divisive since his tenure in office, but we're trying to come together and really make some meaningful changes to really bring about DEI work and those kind of things in our county. So just thank you again for your time and your efforts to do this great work. Thank you again.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our speakers for taking the time this morning to share their thoughts and concerns and observations with us. I really greatly appreciate it. I think that concludes the public hearing portion of our meeting, and I will turn things back over to Attorney General Stein.
Thank you, Justice Earls, and thank everyone for their participation, the public members and all the task force members and the presenters. Justice Earls, do you want to make closing remarks first, or however you want to proceed?
Well, The only thing I will say in closing is to thank everyone for their time this morning, but also I know all the work from staff and task force members that has been going on in between meetings. I'm just enormously grateful to all of you.
Well, I will reiterate that expression of appreciation, and I want to thank everyone on the task force for your time, your partnership, your incredible work, and I want you to know that I personally am grateful for everything that you've given to this effort. And I know that you all, I've heard it a couple times in this call today, have appreciated, just like I have, the work of the staff at the Department of Justice, Governor's Office, and Justice Earls Chambers for the work that they've done to support TREC these past two and a half years. And I just want to take a moment of personal privilege and say some names out loud. And I'll start, of course, with Jasmine McGee, our fearless leader. She has put in so many hours of thoughtful, quality work, managing what has been an extremely complex process. And just thinking about all that she has done in this regard exhausts me. So I can't imagine what it's like to have actually done the work. But Jasmine, we're so grateful. And Jasmine was able to do a lot of her work because she had a ton of people at the Department of Justice supporting her. And I want to call out and recognize Ellen Spoler, Greg Sabin, Leslie Cooley-Dismukes, Holly Jones, Laura Brewer, Naz Ahmed, Mercedes Rastusha Clem, Ashante Pretty, Angela Towns, Malia Benison, Steve Mange. And we've actually had a couple people process out of the Department of Justice, but they helped us out immensely. Jeff Welty and Bradford Sneeden. And others at the Department of Justice also chimed in. The governor's team has been a powerful part of what we've accomplished. Natalia Batea, Natalia, thank you for everything. Rania Hassan, Reggie Boney. Justice Earls has had a few clerks along the way contribute to what we've done. Start with John Paul Jaquette, then Sam Davis, and now most recently with Nicole Tashovsky. This has been an extremely strong team. And I see many of you applauding, and I thank you for doing that because they deserve it. And finally, just a word of profound appreciation to Justice Earls. Justice and equality combined are her North Star. It is what has driven her throughout her entire career. And I've known Justice Earls and respected her for many, many years now. But over these past 2.5 years through this work, my respect for her has deepened tremendously. And Justice Earls, I just wanted to say to you how much I've appreciated co-leading this venture with you.
Well,
and we look forward to seeing everybody in November. It'll be great to be together. And thank you all.
Yeah.
Y'all take care.
Well, thank you, Attorney General Stein. That the feeling is definitely mutual. And so with that, we will conclude this meeting. I look forward to seeing you all in person in November. And thank you again.